So I'm presenting on security cooperation between Japan and the EU. This was my master thesis that I wrote for my graduation from KU Leuven this year. Um, so I'll be talking first, introduce you guys to the topic real quick. Then I'll talk about the EU and Japan as security actors. I'll talk about the relationship between them, about the Indo-Pacific as a geopolitical theater, and then finally about my findings about Japan's role in the EU's approach to the Indo-Pacific and geopolitics in that area. Um, so, introduction to the topic. The inspiration for the research came from the publication of the EU's first official Indo-Pacific strategy on September 16th, 2021. And I decided to look specifically at cooperation between the EU and Japan because both are non-traditional security actors, um, um, but nonetheless play a role in security in the Indo-Pacific region. So I came to the research question, how does the EU-Japan relationship affect the security goals of the EU in its Indo-Pacific strategy? And the themes that I deal with throughout this thesis are the EU and Japan as security actors, their profiles in security and defense, the relationship between them and how it has developed over time into a very comprehensive strategic relationship that does in fact include defense policy, geopolitics in the Indo-Pacific, security and defense, political military security as an overarching theme. And then I apply in my analytical section regional security complex theory by Barry Buzan and Ola Weaver to make sense of what is going on in the Indo-Pacific. First, let's talk about the EU as a security actor. Of course, the EU has a long history of gradual development of its competences in general, and its security and defense competences have been part of its competences since the early 1990s, mainly with the Maastricht Treaty, and ever since it has been developing its security and defense profile, increasing, sort of gradually building it with the CFSP, CSDP, the European External Action Service, and other tools have been added since recently the Coordinated Maritime Presences tool. And what if you trace sort of the development of the European defense security and defense policy, you can see that in recent years it has really developed a sense of urgency with regards to the need for it to act as a geopolitical actor on the international stage. So I included some quotes from the 2022 Strategic Compass, in which the EU defines the present as an era of strategic competition and complex security threats that requires the EU to increase its presence, effectiveness, and visibility in its neighborhood, but also on the global stage through joint efforts and investments. So we can see that the EU currently really also sees itself as an actor that has to be present on the international stage. Then if we move to Japan, the EU is not a traditional security actor. Japan, even though it's a nation state and not a supranational actor, is also not your standard state actor. And that is due to its constitution that was imposed or adopted after the Second World War, that includes Article 9, prohibiting it from having an army and revoking its right of belligerency. So it does have the Japanese self-defense forces, but those are not a traditional army, even though they do possess all the qualities. And that has to do with the fact that Japan has, despite this constitutional obstacle, it has been developing a security and defense policy for itself through reinterpretations of the constitution. Even though the letter of the law says that they cannot have an army, reinterpretations have made it possible that they sort of under or claiming that it's self-defense, they have developed a navy, an air force. So they are in fact a defense actor of sizable proportions right now. And in recent years, the late Prime Minister Abe Shinzo and current Prime Minister Kishida Fumio, they have significantly developed Japan's security and defense policy in response to increasing tensions in the Indo-Pacific region. Japan feels it cannot really avoid having a proper defense policy anymore with rising tensions, with North Korea being an unreliable neighbor, and it feels the need to step up and fulfill its international responsibility. So moving on to the next slide. So over the past years, both actors have become serious security and defense actors, and that has also shown in their relationship. The relationship with the EU and Japan started out as purely economic, but since the early 1990s, it has gradually developed into a strategic partnership, mainly because of the end of the Cold War, changing the geopolitical landscape at the global level. And they have been strengthening their relationship through various treaties, structural political dialogue, and consistent joint positions in international fora, such as, for example, the United Nations. The areas of cooperation currently also include many areas regarding security and defense, such as the regulation of international arms trade, counterterrorism, and nuclear non-proliferation. And they have solidified most recently their strategic partnership through the strategic partnership agreement between the EU and Japan that formulates, apart from these very specific areas that they aim to cooperate on, also a more abstract shared commitment to multilateralism, protection of international security, and a commitment to upholding a rules-based international order. Those are all, of course, commendable ideas, but there's also concrete cooperation that has been achieved, and that's where really this political military aspect comes in. Japan has participated in several of the EU's CSDP missions, for example, in the Gulf of Aden, peacekeeping missions in Mali and Niger. And Japan also is inviting the EU to participate in naval exercises in the Indo-Pacific region. So we can see that the relationship currently does definitely have a security and defense dimension. Then if we start looking at the Indo-Pacific as a geopolitical arena, just a rough sketch, it's of course a vast area, comprises the area from the east coast of Africa to the Pacific Islands, and it's of major economic importance to the world. It is home to vital sea lines of communication running through Southeast Asia, for example. It is set to grow to even larger proportions in terms of population and economy. There's vital economies in the region, like the production of micro or semiconductors in Taiwan. So the Indo-Pacific is important for global prosperity, really, but it also is home to several geopolitical challenges, most notoriously the China-Taiwan issue, the Taiwan Strait issue, but also contestation over other maritime areas, many of which, like these issues, revolve around China claiming certain areas that other states do not agree are China's to claim. There's military buildup in the region. There's, of course, the issue of North Korea being unreliable. And there is, apart from China, also other countries that are subject to democratic instability and illiberalism. So it's not a stable region in that sense. And the EU recognizes both the importance of the Indo-Pacific, but also the fact that it might be more prone to instability than Europe or North America, for that matter. And it's the region also home to various of the EU's partners like Japan, South Korea, the ASEAN group. So it's the EU is very much aware of the need to prevent the escalation of tensions in the Indo-Pacific because it could have a negative impact on a global scale. And in order to, so the EU wants to engage with the Indo-Pacific region in order to promote stability, and it has produced the 2021 Indo-Pacific strategy to structure its engagement. And it has set several goals that it has for the region, which roughly come down. I've sort of summarized them into the following 4 points, which is to increase engagement with the Indo-Pacific region to contribute to regional stability, to protect and promote the rules-based international order, and promote things such as democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, to stimulate international cooperation, not only between the EU and actors in the region, but also at the regional level and at the bilateral level. And then finally, to ensure an open trade and investment environment and improve connectivity in the region. And this final point ties back into the presentation earlier on the Belt and Road Initiative. It's sort of the EU's, or as I interpreted it in my thesis, it's sort of the EU's answer to that initiative, to the BRI. But then if we focus on the security and defense aspect, it's the EU saying that it wants to increase its presence, but how would that take place? It has formulated that. It wants to increase its physical presence in the region through CSDP missions, coordinated maritime presences, and naval exercises and patrols with partners in the region. It does emphasize this cooperation with partners multiple times. But at the same time, apart from its own engagement, it wants to facilitate and strengthen regional security infrastructure by funding, but also by sending EU staff experts towards the region. And I wanted to highlight here that this cooperation with partners is continuously emphasized in the document. And out of all the partners that are mentioned, Japan is mentioned most, 22 times throughout the document, which in light of my thesis was a significant statistic. Then, sort of having gathered all this information on the EU and Japan as security actors, their relationship, and on the Indo-Pacific as a geopolitical arena, I applied the theory of Zahn and Weber's regional security complex theory, which is a very extensive toolkit to analyze regional security dynamics. And the reason I use it is because I believe it accounts very well for the interplay between the regional and the global level. And you can use it to demonstrate how regional dynamics will have repercussions at the global level, and therefore invite the involvement of global powers into a certain region. So these global powers, the EU is a global power, China is of course a global power, Japan is also a global power. They may elect a regional theater to compete with each other, but the competition that's taking place there actually is very relevant for global level stability, and I think that's what we're seeing in the Indo-Pacific. So yeah, as I mentioned, the Indo-Pacific regional security complex is crucial to global level stability and thus attracts the involvement of global powers, including the EU, but also the US, of course. And with increased instability in recent years in the Indo-Pacific, mainly resulting from aggressive or at least assertive behavior by China within the regional security complex, has given the EU an incentive to get involved and try to do its part in maintaining stability. And at the same time, trying to prevent China from venturing too far outside the Indo-Pacific RSC, because the EU right now enjoys a very stable RSC of its own in Europe, on the European continent. So to circle back to the research question, what's the role of the EU-Japan relationship in the EU's approach to the Indo-Pacific? I came to the following points. Japan is definitely significant for the EU's approach to the Indo-Pacific because, for one, it's a like-minded partner that has
please,
similar
sorry
objectives.
For interrupting. 1 minute to conclude, if you please.
All right.
1 minute. Okay.
Yes, so Japan is a like-minded partner that also wants to uphold the rules-based international order, and it is useful for Europe because it can function as a guide in the region. It's an actor inside the region that has long-standing experience dealing with China as a rival. And the fact that it invites the EU to participate in the regional security of the Indo-Pacific also provides the EU with legitimization for its involvement. Then lastly, combining the political and economic weight of the EU and Japan is a way of dissuading China from unilateral change to the status quo and antagonizing either the EU or Japan. And apart from their political economic weight, the fact that they've both been strengthening their security and defense profiles in recent years only adds to this sort of the security coalition currently surrounding China. So yes, this is the conclusion. I sort of summed it up again. The EU and Japan both are not traditional security actors, but have been developing their security and defense profiles since the early 1990s. The Indo-Pacific is a vital RSC for global security and stability, mainly due to the role of China, and thus attracts involvement of the EU. And Japan is not only facilitating, but also also amplifying the potential of the EU's involvement in the region, and legitimizing it as well. That's what I wanted to present, and thank you for listening. I hope I'm on time. Thank you.